What we need to do is build a wall and make Persia pay for it. That's what we're going to do. Good news, guys. We're into Nehemiah, and we are reading, I think it's a pretty popular Old Testament book. If you've never read it, I'm excited that you're going to be walking through it with us. The character of Nehemiah is interesting. The events of Nehemiah is interesting. And a lot of Nehemiah is structured around building a wall, which remains to be a popular thing to talk about today. So this is an important book. I've heard a couple studies done on Nehemiah that kind of pull some leadership ideas from Nehemiah. I think that's kind of an interesting idea. I'm a little bit more interested in just reading Nehemiah for what it is and what it says. And really for kind of tracking through this point in history, we've been seeing the exiles return. We've already seen through Ezra some of the temple is rebuilt. We've seen more and more groups of people return, and I think Nehemiah is a pretty compelling character to talk about. So today we're reading Nehemiah 1-5.
So we open up with Nehemiah in Persia, which is interesting because if our study Bible has like a map of the times, and it's interesting to see just how far Nehemiah was exiled away. It's like a significant distance. So when we open up the book, you'll hear that Nehemiah receives the news of Jerusalem being completely destroyed. The remnant is small, and the people are basically just like in shambles trying to build back the wall. So it's interesting to me that once he hears this, it's kind of like shocking to him, but it makes sense because at the time, I'm sure news would have been spreading at a much slower pace. So he's hearing this, he's completely distraught. He immediately, this caught my attention again. We had talked about the importance of fasting and praying when things get kind of nuts. But Nehemiah, in chapter 1, verse 4, says that when he heard these words, he sat down, wept, mourned for days, and continued fasting and praying before God. So that's another interesting piece. Hello, this is what they do in response to what seems to be completely out of their control.
We've seen now Daniel do this. We've seen Esther do this. We've seen Mordecai do this. We've seen Ezra do this. Now we're seeing Nehemiah do this.
So
it's incredibly important. It should not be lost on us that this is a very important spiritual discipline and practice of seeking the Lord's face. That's what many of these guys are doing. Many of these ladies are doing. And a lot of times they command all the people to do it with them.
So it's like an early on your part.
Yeah, for sure.
Fasting and praying has its
We're just
place.
getting right at it right away.
But then it moves on into this prayer that Nehemiah has. So he's already feeling the pressure and his deep concern for Jerusalem and the remnant that is still left over trying to build back what was destroyed. So we enter into Nehemiah that way, and he's given permission to go back to help with this effort.
And Nehemiah is serving as the chief cupbearer to King Artaxerxes the First. So we talked yesterday, go check it out if you didn't listen to it. We talked yesterday about how God has placed many of these influential believers very close to very powerful kings. We see it over and over and over again, and Nehemiah is just another example. And Nehemiah, another comparison of him to Esther is that he's taking a pretty serious gamble, stepping up in front of this king and being like, I want to go back to my people. And the king rewards, God rewards Nehemiah's bold step. It's a bold thing for him to walk in there and be like, I want to go back and I want to support my people and I want to make Persia pay for it. And and God lets him do that. I think there is your part weaved in there that this is a bold step and it is rewarded. And what would have life looked like had Nehemiah been afraid or ashamed or just assumed somebody else would do it? He's the one stepping up and he's going for it.
So I noticed once he is given permission to go back, he goes back, he starts helping to rebuild the wall. But once he gets there, I feel like this is a callback to other instances that we have heard of where as they begin the work, so the temple was rebuilt before, remember we talked about that in Ezra. Yep. So they're building the temple back up after it had been destroyed. And when they began work, there was a lot of opposition to their building.
Mm-hmm.
We see in Nehemiah similar instances where
Mm-hmm.
they are trying to build back this wall to fortify the city. And in so doing, have people coming opposing what they are doing, taunting them, threatening them, to the point where as they are building this wall back up, they are building with one hand. It said in chapter, I believe in chapter 4, they're building in with one hand while the other hand is holding their sword ready to fight. They have men that are tasked with
Defense.
blowing a horn or a
Yeah.
trumpet in order to get the attention of the people if they would need to defend the city or defend the wall, and stop work so that they can keep people away or out.
An interesting historical fact here is that the people who opposed Nehemiah were Sanballat, Tobiah, and Gershom.
Mm-hmm.
And there is historical archaeological evidence from this time period about Sanballat, Tobiah, and Gershom. It's from a lot of Egyptian records.
Interesting.
But there is like papyrus records, old things have been dug out of the ground that talk about financial records of Sanballat, locations of Tobiah's kingdom, where Gershom was at the time. So these are real people that have been confirmed by history, that also are confirmed by the Bible, that opposed rebuilding the wall. They opposed that these Jews would be protected in Jerusalem.
So crazy. So I think that, again, is helpful to know that there was extreme opposition to the point of like physical threat to build back God's, well, I guess it would be the wall that was protecting God's temple.
Yeah.
So that is just so crazy. And I think that's comforting to me, like present day. Again, that idea of opposition, things are going to come up. Like, it is no surprise to me that when I feel like I am working hard or like God is doing things in my life through me, through my life, that I'm going to feel that opposition. There, we live in a very spiritual world. Like, we don't often think that or like realize that, and very much go on the physical realm of things or physical side of things. But when the Lord is working, there is a spiritual battle going on all of the time. So when opposition comes my way in the sense of spiritual things, I'm not surprised by that. It's definitely uncomfortable. It's definitely frustrating, and it can be like very much a downer or like a depressing thing to feel the pressures of like spiritual warfare. But I do feel like that is what was going on. But what we have that the enemy doesn't is God is on our side, and he will have done what he wants done. His will come to fruition. So that's like exciting.
Another thing that I love about Nehemiah in these opening chapters is actually in chapter 5. What he finds out in chapter 5 is that not everybody is handling their finances and care for other people the way they should. Mm-hmm. They're charging interest, which is a big no-no.
Is that to each other? Like,
yeah.
Against each other, they're doing
so
this.
there's a couple different groups where some people are sold into slavery to pay their debts. Some people are having a hard time paying their debts to Persia, so they're having to borrow money. Some people are charging interest against others. So there's a lot of like weird financial stuff.
So it's almost like we are already in a terrible spot. I need money from you,
Yes.
and you're going to charge me interest on the stuff that you're allowing me to borrow
Yes.
from you. So it's just like this horrible, awful cycle that just like can't be broken. Everybody's stuck still.
So what Nehemiah could do is say, hey, listen, I'm here to build the wall. I don't care about your financial status. I don't care about how you're handling your debts. We need to build this wall. We'll worry about that stuff later. But he understands, and this is a cool leadership lesson from Nehemiah, he understands that the character of the people deeply affects the work that's being done. And so you can't have this work completed by people who don't have character. What's the point of rebuilding Jerusalem if nobody cares about each other? If nobody cares about the people? Like, if all you care about is the actual work and you're not concerned about the people, it's pointless.
Jerusalem, the sequel.
Yeah, so it's really cool to see Nehemiah basically declare like an amnesty, like, hey, we're not doing this whole debt thing. We're going to forgive debts. We're going to care for people. We're going to do what God's law says we need to do. And we see here Nehemiah saying, yeah, we're going to get the job done, but we're going to honor God as we do the job. And then we've talked so often about evil shepherds. We see the heart of Nehemiah as a really, really good shepherd because he says, I'm entitled to this like governor's allowance, and I'm not going to take it. He's not going to enrich himself on these people. What a refreshing thing to see in Nehemiah's day and in our day. Like, I'm not here to get rich off of this. I just want you to know who the Lord is. And so Nehemiah says, like, yeah, I need to live. Like it actually spells out like what his portion is. It's like let me see, chapter 5, verse 18.
Shekels.
For each day was 1 ox and 6 choice sheep and birds, and every 10 days all kinds of wine in abundance, which is interesting. I guess he wasn't against drinking wine in abundance. For all this, I did not demand the food allowance of the governor because the service was too heavy on the people.
Well, and also in chapter 5, verse 15, the former governors who were before me laid heavy burdens on their people and took from them their daily ration, 40 shekels of silver.
So how refreshing is it to see a leader of God's people saying, nope, I'm entitled to that. I'm not going to take that.
I don't
because I'm not going to put this weight on you. Like, feed me what I need, care for me the way I need to be cared for. But you can do your thing. We're going to care for each other. We're going to look out for each other. We're going to defend each other. We are going to be God's people together. It is so wonderful to see a good shepherd.
Refreshing.
I love it. Yeah. So I think we thread in plenty of your parts today. You can take your pick.
It's a buffet of your parts.
Care for the people around you. Don't take advantage of the people around you. Take bold steps to serve the Lord. Like if Nehemiah wouldn't have proposed this crazy thing, we wouldn't have a book of Nehemiah. There's a lot here. So I'm excited for this book. It's short. We're going to be done with it in like 3 or 4 days. But I invite you to stick around for the reading. You can read it yourself. You can listen to us read it. Don't take our word for it. Take God's word for it. We'll be back again tomorrow. We'll see you then.
Thanks so much for listening to God's Plan, Your Part. If anything stuck out to you, if you have any questions, or if you'd like to receive a Bible, you can email us at godsplanyourpart@gmail.com. Also, if you're enjoying the podcast, please consider supporting us through the link in our description. We love that you're on this journey with us, and we hope you have a great day. See you tomorrow.